They summoned humans to the Deathworld Summit. Massive Era Part 1. The summons, the Galactic Council Chamber, was the largest structure ever built by intelligent life. It floated in the empty space between 3 star systems. A massive station made of crystal and metal that could hold 10 million beings at once. Today, only 3,000 sat in the Great Hall, but the fear in that room was enough to fill the entire station. Ambassador Threxvol stood at the central platform. His body was made of something like living glass, and light passed through him in waves of blue and green. When his species felt emotion, they glowed. Right now, he was glowing a deep and troubled purple. The Vrekan hegemony has taken 14 systems in the last rotation, he announced. His voice was translated instantly into 6,000 languages. They have consumed the Peleth. They have enslaved the Mordrani. They are moving toward the inner worlds, and we have nothing that can stop them. The chamber erupted in noise. Beings of every shape and size began shouting, clicking, vibrating, and flashing their opinions. Some called for surrender. Some called for negotiation. A few brave voices called for war, but those voices were quickly silenced by their neighbors. Everyone knew the truth. The council species were peaceful. They had evolved on gentle worlds with stable climates and abundant food. They had never needed to fight, never needed to develop weapons, never needed to become hard. The Vrekan, on the other hand, came from a harsh world of constant conflict. They were built for war in ways the council species could never match. Threxvol raised his appendages for silence. Slowly, the chamber grew quiet. There is one option we have never considered, he said. One resource we have never used. The galaxy contains many worlds like the Vrekan homeworld. Worlds of danger. Worlds of death. We have always avoided these worlds and the species that live on them. We have quarantined them, contained them, left them alone. He paused. Perhaps it is time to change that policy. A ripple of shock passed through the chamber. Everyone knew what he was suggesting. Deathworlds were legendary in galactic society. They were planets where everything wanted to kill you. The gravity was too strong, the weather too violent, the predators too numerous, the diseases too deadly. Any species that evolved on such a world would be, by necessity, extremely dangerous. You want to unleash monsters, said a delegate from the Yilish Communion. You want to bring killers into civilized space. I want to survive, Threxvol replied. The Vrekan are one Deathworld species. Perhaps the only way to stop them is with others. The debate lasted for 3 full days. In the end, the motion passed by a narrow margin. Invitations would be sent to 14 known Deathworld civilizations. They would be asked to attend the summit on neutral ground to discuss a possible alliance against the Vrekan threat. The most controversial invitation was the last. 1. Earth. Sol System. Class 12 Deathworld. The reports on Earth were terrifying. The planet had extreme temperature variations, constant geological activity, and weather systems that could destroy cities. It was covered in liquid water that contained millions of predatory species. The land was filled with venomous creatures, carnivorous plants, and diseases that evolved faster than medicine could cure them. And at the top of this nightmare food chain sat humanity. Humans were pursuit predators. They could run for days without stopping. They healed from wounds that would kill most species. They could survive in almost any environment, eat almost any organic matter, and adapt to almost any situation. They had spread across their entire planet and had even begun reaching toward their moon and neighboring worlds. But the most frightening thing about humans was their history. They had spent their entire existence at war. They fought each other constantly, developing weapons of increasing destruction. They had split the atom. They had created biological weapons. They had poisoned their own atmosphere and still survived. Many council members argued against inviting them at all. They were too dangerous, too unpredictable, too violent. But Threxval insisted. If they wanted Deathworlders, they should invite the most dangerous ones they knew. The quantum beacon carried the invitation across 50,000 light-years of space. The Council expected to wait months for a response. Primitive species took time to detect and decode such signals. The response came in 3 days. Not just a message, but a ship. It appeared at the edge of Council space without warning, sliding out of something that was definitely not standard hyperspace. The vessel was sleek and dark, built for speed and stealth in ways that made Council engineers very nervous. It had clearly been designed by a species that expected to fight. The ship requested permission to dock at the Council's diplomatic station. After much debate, permission was granted. The human delegation that emerged consisted of 5 individuals. 3 women and 2 men, all dressed in simple gray uniforms. They walked with a fluid grace that spoke of perfect physical control. Their eyes moved constantly, scanning every shadow, noting every exit, assessing every potential threat. Threxval had volunteered to greet them. He approached with what he hoped was a welcoming glow, his bioluminescence shifting to warm yellows and oranges. "Welcome to Council Space," he said. "I am Ambassador Threxval of the Merithian Collective. We are honored by your presence." The human leader stepped forward. She was tall by human standards, with dark hair cut short and skin the color of polished bronze. Her eyes were brown, but in certain light, they seemed almost golden. "Commander Sarah Chun," she said. "United Earth Defense Coalition." She extended her hand, and Threxval realized with a start that she expected him to touch her. Physical contact between species was considered extremely intimate in Council culture, but he had studied human customs. He reached out with one appendage and let her grip it firmly. Her hand was warm. Very warm. Humans ran hot, he remembered. Their bodies burned energy at rates that would kill most species. "Thank you for the invitation," Commander Chun said. She smiled, and Threxval saw her teeth. They were white and flat, but the canines were still sharp enough to tear flesh. It was, he realized, a predator's smile. "We've been watching the Vrecken situation with great interest. You know of the Vrecken?" Threxval asked, surprised. "We know many things, Ambassador." Chum released his appendage and looked around the docking bay with those hunters' eyes. "We've been waiting for this invitation for a very long time." She smiled again, and Threxval felt his secondary hearts begin to race. "We have suggestions," she said. "Many suggestions." For the first time since the crisis began, Threxval was not sure if he should feel hopeful or afraid. Looking at Commander Chun and her team of quiet, watchful predators, he suspected the answer might be both. They summoned humans to the Deathworld Summit. Massive Aeropart 2. The summit station Kethrix was built to be uncomfortable. That was the point. The Galactic Council had designed it as neutral ground for dangerous species, a place where no one would feel at home. The temperature shifted randomly. The gravity fluctuated between zones. The lighting was harsh. The food was terrible. And the sleeping quarters were barely functional. The Council believed this would keep the Deathworld delegates on edge, unable to form alliances, focused only on their own survival. They expected the summit to be filled with tension, threats, and displays of dominance. They were completely wrong. Ambassador Threxval watched from the observation deck as the human delegation arrived in the main meeting hall. 13 other Deathworld species had already taken their positions around the circular chamber. Each group had claimed a section and marked it as territory. The Krethians had scratched deep grooves into the floor. The Drovathi had simply sat down and refused to move, their silicon bodies creating small craters in the metal. The Yith had lowered the temperature in their section until frost formed on the walls. The humans walked into this chaos, and did something unexpected. They split up. Commander Chun approached the Krethian delegation directly. The Krethians were 8-limbed predators, each one standing 3 meters tall. Their homeworld had gravity twice Earth's standard, acid rain, and volcanic activity that reshaped continents every few centuries. They were covered in armor plates the color of dried blood, and their faces had no expression that council species could read. A normal diplomat would have been terrified. Commander Chun walked up to their war leader and bowed slightly. "I am told your people ferment a drink from volcanic minerals," she said. "I would be honored to share some with you. In return, I have brought something from my world." She produced a bottle of amber liquid. "We call it whiskey. It burns going down." The Krethian war leader studied her for a long moment. Then he made a sound like grinding stones, which the translator rendered as laughter. "You honor us with poison," he said. "This is good. Come, sit. We will burn together." Meanwhile, the human engineer, a man named David Park, had approached the Yith delegation. The Yith came from a frozen world of methane storms and temperatures that would flash freeze most organic life. They resembled tall columns of blue-white ice, and they communicated by shifting the crystalline structures within their bodies. "Your ship's insulation system is fascinating," Park said. "I noticed you use a layered vacuum approach with thermal exchange nodes. We developed something similar for our Antarctic research stations. Would you like to compare designs?" The Yith shifted, their internal crystals rearranging into patterns of interest. Within an hour, Park and 3 Yith engineers were huddled over holographic displays, discussing heat transfer coefficients with obvious excitement. The human linguist, Dr. Maria Santos, had taken on the greatest challenge. She walked toward the Drovathi. The Drovathi were not organic life. They were silicon-based entities, massive creatures of living stone that communicated through subsonic vibrations. No council species had ever successfully talked to them. They were invited to the summit only because they were incredibly powerful and potentially useful. Dr. Santos stopped a respectful distance from the nearest Drovathi. She carried a small device in her hand. She pressed a button, and the device emitted a low hum. The Drovathi shifted. For the first time in recorded history, one of them turned to face a non-Drovathi being directly. The hum changed pitch. It rose and fell in patterns that seemed random to everyone watching. But the Drovathi responded, their massive bodies vibrating in answer. Dr. Santos smiled. She adjusted her device and hummed again. "What is she doing?" Threxvol asked his aide. "I believe, Ambassador, she is speaking to them." "She learned their language." "That is impossible. Our best linguists have worked for centuries without success. The humans have been preparing for this summit for quite some time." "It seems." Threxvol watched in growing amazement as the pattern repeated across the chamber. Every human delegate was engaging with a different species. They were not threatening or posturing. They were not demanding respect or territory. They were simply talking, sharing, connecting. By the end of the first day, Commander Chun had formed a drinking partnership with the Krethian war leader. David Park had begun a joint engineering project with the Yith. Dr. Santos was teaching. The Drovathi how to modulate their vibrations so other species could understand them. The other Deathworld species watched the humans with new eyes. These strange, soft creatures from a water-covered world were not behaving like predators. They were behaving like friends. On the second day, the humans hosted what they called a cultural exchange. They shared food from Earth. The Krethians discovered they loved spicy peppers. The Yith found Earth chocolate fascinating, as it changed phase from solid to liquid at temperatures they considered dangerously hot. Even the Drovathi accepted a sample of salt, which apparently created pleasant vibrations in their crystalline structures. The humans asked questions. They wanted to know about homeworlds, about history, about traditions. They listened more than they talked. They found common ground everywhere they looked. Every Deathworld species had survived impossible odds. Everyone had stories of struggle and triumph. Everyone understood what it meant to fight for survival. On the third day, Commander Chun called a joint meeting. "We've all been brought here because the Council is afraid," she said. "They see us as weapons to be aimed at their enemy, tools to be used and then discarded." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every delegation. "But we are not tools. We are people. People who have survived things that would destroy lesser species. People who understand each other in ways the Council never will." The Krethian war leader stood. "You speak truth, human. The soft ones think we are monsters. They do not see that monsters can have honor." A Yith representative chimed in, their crystals singing. "They quarantine our worlds because they fear us. They never asked if we wished to join their civilization." The Drovathi rumbled, and Dr. Santos translated. "They say, the small minds cannot see past the stone. They see only threat, never possibility." Commander Chun nodded. "So I propose something new. Not an alliance formed by the Council to fight their war. An alliance formed by us for us. A coalition of Deathworld species who will work together by choice, not compulsion." The vote was unanimous. By the end of day 3, 14 species that had never met before had formed the Deathworld Coalition. They had shared technology, culture, and most importantly, trust. Threxvol watched the celebration from his observation deck. He had expected violence. He had expected chaos. He had expected to see predators fighting for dominance. Instead, he saw something that terrified him far more. He saw friendship, and somewhere in the shadows of Station Kethrix, Reckon spies were sending a message to their hegemony. A message that would change everything. The message read, "Abort expansion. Reassess threat level. The humans have done something unexpected." But the hegemony did not listen. That would prove to be their greatest mistake. They summoned humans to the Deathworld Summit. Massive Error Part 3. The demonstration. Alarms began screaming at dawn on the 4th day. Ambassador Threxvol was pulled from his rest cycle by emergency, lights and warning sounds. He rushed to the command center, his translucent body glowing with panic colors of red and orange. What he saw on the display screens made his heart stop. 17 Vrecken dreadnoughts hung in space around Station Kethrix. Each one was 5 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could crack open a moon. They had appeared without warning, dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Their weapon arrays were already charging, filling the void with a sickly green light. The station's commander, a frightened Yilish officer, was trying to establish communication. "Reckon Fleet, this is Station Kethrix. You are in violation of neutral space treaties. Please state your intentions." The response came immediately. A Vrecken face appeared on the main screen. It was a nightmare of sharp angles and too many teeth, with black eyes that reflected no light. This was Supreme Commander Vrexkoth, one of the most feared military leaders in the hegemony. "We know what you are doing in that station," Vrexkoth said. His voice was like metal scraping against metal. "You are gathering Deathworld primitives to use against us. This is unacceptable. Surrender all Deathworld delegates to us for processing, or we will destroy you." Threxvol felt despair wash over him. Processing was the Vrecken word for execution. They wanted to kill every Deathworlder on the station before the new alliance could become a threat. "We need to evacuate," the station commander said. "Begin loading the escape pods." "There is no time," Threxvol replied. "They will destroy any ship that tries to leave." He turned to look at the section of the command center where the human delegation had gathered. Commander Chung stood calmly, watching the Vrecken ships on the display. She did not look afraid. She looked almost pleased. "Commander Chun," Threxvol said, "do you have any suggestions?" Chun smiled that predator smile. "Just one, Ambassador." She touched the communication device on her wrist. "All coalition forces, execute Operation Handshake." Threxvol did not understand. What coalition forces? The Deathworlders had brought only diplomatic ships, small vessels meant for transport. Not combat. Then the first explosion lit up the void. The Krethian Ceremonial Honor Guard had apparently been much larger than reported. 200 Krethian shock troops in powered armor launched from a cargo bay that should have been too small to hold them. They used personal thrust units to cross the empty space between the station and the nearest Vrekin dreadnought in seconds. The Vrekin had shields designed to stop energy weapons and missiles. They were not designed to stop angry Krethians moving at combat speed. The shock troops hit the dreadnought's hull and began cutting through with plasma claws. Within minutes, they were inside the ship, moving through corridors and disabling critical systems. At the same time, the Yith transport vessel revealed its secret. A weapon platform extended from its belly, something the Yith had been developing in secret for centuries. It fired a beam of absolute cold, a lance of frozen energy that struck the second dreadnought and flash froze its entire engine section. The massive ship went dark and began to drift. The Drovathi did not even need weapons. 3 of them simply walked outside the station through an airlock. They did not need suits. They did not need air. Silicon-based life could survive in vacuum indefinitely. The nearest Vrekin ship tried to fire on them, but energy weapons did nothing to creatures made of living stone. The Drovathi reached the ship's hull and began tearing it apart with their bare hands. Metal screamed as they ripped open armor plating like paper. And through all of this, the human ship moved. The persistence was small compared to the Vrekin dreadnoughts. It was barely 200 meters long, a sleek needle of dark metal. But it flew like nothing Threxvol had ever seen. The ship twisted and turned at speeds that should have reduced its crew to paste. It danced between dreadnoughts, sliding through weapon fire that would have destroyed any council vessel. Every time it passed close to a Vrekin ship, something happened. Engine pods went dark. Weapon arrays exploded. Communication towers shattered. The humans were not trying to destroy the Vrekin fleet. They were disabling it, cutting it apart piece by piece with surgical precision. Supreme Commander Vrexkoth screamed orders at his fleet, but chaos had already taken hold. Ships collided with each other trying to track the persistence. Others fired wild shots that hit their own allies. A Krethian squad had reached the Supreme Commander's own bridge and was currently fighting through his personal guard. In 47 minutes. It was over. 17 Vrekin dreadnoughts drifted in space, disabled, helpless. Not one had been destroyed. Not one crew had been killed, though many were injured or unconscious. The Deathworld Coalition had taken the most powerful fleet the hegemony had sent outside their home territory and turned it into floating wreckage without a single death. Commander Chun opened a channel to the Vrekin flagship. Vrexkoth appeared on screen, his face twisted with rage and confusion. "You were warned," Chun said calmly. "Your spies told you to abort." "You did not listen." She leaned forward slightly. This fleet was defeated by a coalition of species who had never met before 4 days ago. We had no time to plan, no time to train together, no time to coordinate. We won because we trusted each other. She let that sink in. "Imagine what we could do with preparation," she continued. "Imagine what we could do with time. Imagine what we could do if you gave us a reason to actually try." Her eyes hardened. "Go home, Supreme Commander. Tell your hegemony what happened here. Tell them that the galaxy is no longer defenseless. Tell them that the Deathworlders have found each other, and we are not afraid of them." She cut the communication dot, Rex Vol realized he had stopped breathing. His species did not actually need to breathe continuously, but the habit was hard to break in times of stress. He forced himself to take in air and calm his racing hearts. "That was impossible," he said. "What you just did was impossible." Chun turned to look at him. Her expression softened slightly. "Nothing is impossible, Ambassador. Some things are just very difficult." She smiled, and this time it was not a predator smile. It was something warmer. "The Vrekin made a mistake today. They thought we would fight like them, kill like them. They did not understand that Deathworlders know the value of life better than anyone. We have fought too hard to survive to waste lives unnecessarily." She looked out the viewport at the drifting Vrekin ships. "Today was a demonstration," she said. "A message. The real work begins now." Threxval did not know what that meant. He was about to find out. They summoned humans to the Deathworld Summit. Massive Error Part 4. The Revelation. Galactic Council demanded an emergency session. 3 days after the battle at Station Kethrix, representatives from every council species gathered in the Great Chamber. They were frightened, confused, and desperate for answers. The humans had done something that should have been impossible, and they wanted to know how Commander Sarah Chun stood at the central platform where ambassadors normally spoke. Behind her stood the other members of the Deathworld Coalition, their representatives arranged in a show of unity. The Krethian war leader, still wearing his battle-scarred armor. The Yith commander, her crystalline form shimmering with cold light. The Drovathi representative, a mountain of living stone that made the floor groan under its weight. And others, all 14 species standing together. Ambassador Threxval asked the first question. His bioluminescence was cycling through colors of confusion and concern. "Commander Chun, the Council must understand what happened. How did you coordinate such a complex attack with species you had only just met? How did your ship perform maneuvers that our engineers say should be impossible? How did you know to bring military forces to a diplomatic summit?" Chun nodded slowly. She had expected these questions. "You want the truth, Ambassador?" she asked. "The full truth, with nothing hidden?" "Yes, please." Chun touched a control on her wrist, and a holographic display appeared above the platform. It showed Earth, blue and green and white, spinning slowly in the darkness of space. 40,000 years ago, your ancestors found our world," she began. "They scanned it, classified it as a Class 12 Deathworld, and decided we were too dangerous to contact. They placed warning beacons around our system. They marked us as a quarantine zone. They assumed we would remain isolated, primitive, and unaware." The display zoomed out, showing the beacons that surrounded the Sol system. They were wrong. The display changed, showing Earth in a different era. Ancient structures that might have been temples. Primitive telescopes pointed at the sky. "Our ancestors saw your warning lights centuries ago. They did not know what they were, but they knew something was out there. They watched. They waited. They remembered." The display jumped forward, showing more modern Earth. Satellites in orbit. Radio telescopes searching the sky. In 1977, one of our deep space listening stations detected a pattern in the beacon signals. It took us 7 years to decode the basic language. By 1984, we understood enough to know what the beacons meant. We knew we were being watched. We knew we were being contained. The council chamber had gone completely silent. 10 million eyes were fixed on Commander Chun. "We made a decision then," she continued. "We would not reveal ourselves. We would not announce our presence. Instead, we would prepare." The display showed decades of human activity. Satellites being launched. Ships being built in hidden facilities. Scientists working in underground laboratories. "We tapped into your communication networks in 1996. It was not difficult. Your encryption is based on mathematics we mastered centuries ago. Since then, we have monitored everything. Every political development, every scientific discovery, every military movement. She paused to let that sink in. We knew about the Vrekan hegemony before most council species did. We watched their expansion. We studied their tactics. We built ships specifically designed to counter their weapons and strategies. The display showed blueprints of the Persistence and its sister ships. The council engineers in the audience made sounds of shock and fascination. We also studied every Deathworld species we could identify. We learned their languages, their cultures, their histories. We looked for common ground. We planned for the day when we might meet them. She gestured to the coalition representatives behind her. Every conversation my team had at the summit was prepared in advance. We knew what the Krethians value. We knew how the Yith think. We spent 20 years learning to communicate with the Drovathi. She smiled slightly. We did not come to Station Kethrix hoping to make allies. We came knowing exactly how to make them. Threxvol's form flickered with distress. You manipulated us, he said. You manipulated everyone. No, Chun said firmly. We prepared. There's a difference. She stepped closer to the ambassador. We could have revealed ourselves at any time. We could have demanded recognition, technology, resources. We could have used what we knew to take advantage of you. She spread her hands. Instead, we waited. We watched. We tried to understand you. Not as threats to be neutralized, but as potential partners. Potential friends. The display behind her changed again, showing scenes from the summit. Humans sharing food with Krethians. Engineers collaborating with Yith scientists. Dr. Santos patiently teaching Drovathi to communicate with other species. Everything we did at the summit was genuine, Chan said. The friendships we formed were real. The trust we built was real. We simply came prepared to build them. She turned to address the entire council. You summoned us here because you were afraid. Afraid of the Vrekan, afraid of Deathworlders, afraid of what might happen if dangerous species worked together. You expected monsters. You expected chaos and violence. Her voice softened. What you got was something you never considered possible. You got cooperation. You got alliance. You got species that should have been enemies learning to trust each other in a matter of days. She looked at the coalition representatives, then back at the council. Do you want to know our real secret? Our real weapon? She smiled. It is not our ships or our soldiers or our technology. It is our ability to see potential friends and strangers. To build trust across impossible divides. To find common ground where none seems to exist. She walked back to stand with her coalition allies. The Deathworld Coalition was not formed to fight your war. It was formed because 14 species recognized something in each other. Something the Council has never understood about Deathworlders. The Krethian war leader stepped forward, his voice rumbling through the translator. Survival is not about being the strongest, he said. It is about standing together against the darkness. The Yith commander chimed in. On harsh worlds, those who cooperate survive. Those who fight alone die alone. The Drovathi rumbled, and Dr. Santos translated. Even stone knows this truth. Mountains are made of countless grains pressed together. Alone, we are dust. Together, we are unbreakable. Commander Chun nodded. We did not come here to be your weapons council. We came here to be your partners. To show you that the galaxy does not have to be divided between the civilized and the dangerous, the soft and the hard. We came to offer something better. She extended her hand toward Ambassador Threxvol. We came to offer friendship. Real friendship. Between equals. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, Threxvol reached out and took her hand. His bioluminescence shifted to a warm, hopeful gold. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "we have much to learn from each other." And in that moment, something changed in the galaxy. Something that would never be undone. They summoned humans to the Deathworld Summit. Massive Era, Part 5, the Era 10. Years had passed since the Deathworld Summit. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The Vrekan hegemony, once the most feared power in known space, had collapsed from within. Not from military defeat, but from revolution. The species they had conquered had watched the coalition stand against them at Station Kethrix. They had seen Deathworlders work together, protect each other, win without unnecessary death. And they had begun to wonder why they should accept Vrekan rule. The rebellion started small. A mining colony here, a factory world there. But they spread quickly, like fire through dry grass. The Deathworld coalition did not conquer the hegemony. They simply arrived whenever a rebellion needed support, helped the locals secure their freedom, and then left. They asked for nothing in return except the promise of peaceful cooperation. One by one, the Vrekan client states broke away. One by one, they joined a new galactic order built on partnership instead of domination. Commander Sarah Chun, now Admiral Chun, had retired from active service. She spent her days teaching at the first multi-species military academy, helping young officers from 100 different worlds learn to work together. She was considered a hero on most planets, though she never felt comfortable with the title. Ambassador Threxvol had also retired from diplomatic service. But instead of returning to his home world, he had done something unprecedented. He had moved to Earth, the first non-human to live on the Deathworld full-time. Threxvol had accepted a position at the University of New Geneva, teaching galactic relations to human students. The campus had been modified to accommodate his needs, with special lighting and climate controls. But he found that he did not need many accommodations. Earth was harsh, yes, but the humans had worked hard to make him welcome. Now, on a warm spring evening, Threxvol stood before a lecture hall filled with eager young faces. Human students mostly, but also a few Krethians. Some Yith exchange scholars, and even a young Drovathi who communicated through a translation device. Today, Threxvol began, his bioluminescence settling into the soft blue of teaching mode. We discussed the greatest era in galactic history. My era, the Council's era, the era that changed everything. He activated a holographic display showing Earth as it had appeared to Council scouts 40,000 years ago. When my ancestors found your world, they saw a nightmare, he said. Extreme temperatures, deadly predators, constant geological and meteorological danger. They saw creatures that had evolved to survive through violence and competition. And they made an assumption. The display showed images of human history, wars and conflicts spanning millennia. They assumed that violence was all you knew, that a species forged in constant struggle would be incapable of anything else. They saw your wars, your weapons, your endless conflicts with each other, and they decided you were too dangerous to contact, too savage to join civilized space. The display shifted to show the quarantine beacons. So they locked you away. They surrounded your system with warnings. They watched from a distance and congratulated themselves on their wisdom. Threxvol's form flickered with colors of regret. This was the error. Not the quarantine itself, but the assumption behind it. We did not understand what we were looking at. The display changed again, showing different images. Humans building shelters together after natural disasters. People sharing food during famines. Strangers risking their lives to save others they had never met. You see, we observed your violence and thought it defined you. We did not see what the violence was fighting against. We did not understand that every war was also a story of cooperation. soldiers fighting for each other, communities supporting their defenders, enemies eventually becoming allies. He paused, his luminescence shifting to warmer colors. We did not understand that surviving a Deathworld requires more than strength. It requires something harder to achieve. It requires the ability to trust, to cooperate, to look at another being, even a stranger, even a former enemy, and see not a threat but a potential friend. A Crethian student raised a clawed hand. Ambassador, are you saying Deathworlders are more cooperative than Council species? Thrax Vol made the rippling motion that indicated thoughtful consideration. I am saying that you learned cooperation under pressure that we never faced. On gentle worlds, cooperation is easy. There is enough for everyone. Conflict is costly and unnecessary. But on worlds like Earth, cooperation is a matter of survival. You learn to trust quickly, deeply, and completely because you had no choice. He gestured toward the Drovathi student. Our silicon friend here comes from a world where pressure and heat forge individuals together into communities. The Yith survived their frozen hells by sharing warmth and resources without question. The Crethians, he nodded to the armored students. Your bonding rituals are sacred because they transform strangers into family. The display showed the Deathworld Coalition in its current form. A network of species spanning a third of the galaxy. Council species have struggled for millennia to build lasting alliances. We make treaties, we form agreements, but true trust eludes us. We always hold something back. We always fear betrayal. Thrax Vol's form glowed with the amber of fond memory. At Station Kethrix, I watched 14 species become a family in 4 days. I watched beings who had never met share their deepest secrets and their most powerful weapons. I watched trust form at a speed that should have been impossible. He looked directly at his audience. That was when I understood the error. We thought you were dangerous because you were violent. We did not realize you were dangerous because you were capable of bonds we could barely imagine. Bonds forged in fire and hardship and shared survival. The display faded, leaving only the lecture hall in soft light. The Galactic Council summoned humanity expecting monsters. They planned to point you at their enemies and then discard you when the threat was ended. They thought they were the civilized ones, using primitive weapons against primitive threats. Thrax Vol's bioluminescence shifted to the warm gold of hope and friendship. Instead, they got teachers. They got partners. They got a species that showed them what true cooperation looks like. He spread his appendages in a gesture of openness. The error was not in summoning you. The error was in underestimating what you would bring. Not weapons, not violence, but the ability to turn strangers into friends. He looked around the lecture hall at the mixed faces. The different species sitting together, learning together, becoming friends themselves. You asked me what I have learned in 10 years on your Deathworld, he said. I have learned that the Council was wrong about everything. You are not monsters. You are not weapons. You are simply people who have learned the hardest lesson in the universe. He smiled, his entire form glowing with warmth. You have learned that the only way to survive impossible odds is together. The lecture ended. Students filed out, chatting in half a dozen languages. A human girl stopped to ask Thrax Vol a question about galactic law. A Crethian and a Yith argued good-naturedly about physics. The young Drovathi rumbled something that made a nearby human laugh. Thrax Vol watched them go, these children of a new era. An era that had begun with an error and become something beautiful. The galaxy would never be the same dot, and that, he thought, was exactly as it should be.